you ever found yourself saying yes to something you really didn't want to do? Maybe it was a favor for a colleague, an errand for a family member, or a last-minute task from someone who never seems to respect your time. And afterward, you felt drained, frustrated, or maybe even a little resentful. Sound familiar? Saying yes can feel like the easiest thing in the moment. It avoids conflict, keeps the peace, and makes you seem helpful. But here's the thing, every time you say yes to something that doesn't align with your values or priorities, you're actually saying no to yourself. You're giving away a little piece of your time, energy, and sanity to someone else. Now, let's talk about the elephant in the room, the people who make this so much harder. We're not just talking about anyone here. We're talking about those people, the ones who don't take a hint, who push, guilt, and manipulate until they get their way. Let's call them what they are: idiots. Not in the sense of being unintelligent, but in the sense of being inconsiderate, selfish, and sometimes downright toxic. But here's the good news. You don't have to keep giving in. Saying no is a skill, a muscle you can strengthen with practice. And it's not about being rude or harsh. It's about reclaiming control over your own life. So, stick with me as we dive into this topic. By the end of this video, you'll not only understand why it's so hard to say no, but you'll also learn practical ways to do it with confidence and grace. You'll discover how to handle those tricky situations and finally set boundaries that stick. Ready? Let's get started. Let's take a step back and explore why saying no feels so difficult sometimes. After all, it's just one little word. How can it carry so much weight? Well, the truth is we're wired to avoid conflict. From a young age, many of us are taught that saying yes is the polite thing to do. Be helpful. Don't disappoint people. Go along to get along. It's no wonder that as adults, we often feel guilty or even selfish when we try to assert ourselves. Now, let's talk about the people who make this even harder. You know the type. They push your boundaries, manipulate you with guilt, or just bulldoze their way into your time and energy. These aren't people who ask for your help. They expect it. And when you hesitate, they have a whole arsenal of tactics to make you feel like you owe them. Why do we give in to these people? It's not because we're weak or clueless. It's because we value relationships. We don't want to hurt feelings or cause a scene. And deep down, we all crave approval. The problem is, constantly saying yes to keep the peace isn't really peace. It's a slow drain on your mental and emotional well-being. Here's something to think about. Every time you prioritize someone else's wants over your own needs, you send a subtle message that your time and boundaries don't matter. And you know what? The people who push you notice. The more you give in, the more they'll take. But don't worry. It's not too late to flip the script. Understanding why you struggle to say no is the first step toward changing it. Once you recognize the patterns, both in your behavior and in theirs, you can start reclaiming your power. In the next chapter, we'll dive into some real-world examples of how these situations play out and why they're so emotionally draining. Trust me, you'll see yourself in these stories, and that's a good thing. Awareness is the key to making a change. Let's bring this to life with some examples. Picture this. You're at work, focused on your tasks, when a colleague casually swings by and says, "Hey, could you take care of this for me? I'm swamped." It's not the first time they've asked, and it won't be the last. Somehow, their busy always seems to take priority over your own workload. You feel a twinge of frustration, but you sigh and agree. Again. Or maybe it's that one friend who only calls when they need a favor. "Hey, can you pick me up from the airport? Mind if I borrow some money? Can you help me move this weekend?" They're charming, maybe even fun to be around, but when was the last time they did something for you? And then there's family. Oh, the family. Your cousin assumes you'll babysit her kids because, well, you're free, right? Or that uncle who ropes you into fixing his computer every time there's a family gathering. After all, you're good with technology. Now, here's what these situations have in common. They're not asks, they're expectations. These people don't stop to consider your time, your energy, or your priorities. They operate as though your resources are theirs for the taking. But here's the kicker, it's not always malicious. Sometimes, These people don't even realize they're overstepping because they've been conditioned to expect a yes from you. And let's be honest, we've all contributed to this dynamic by saying yes when we really wanted to say no. Think about the last time you agreed to something like this. How did it feel afterward? Frustrating? Draining? Did you spend the rest of the day replaying the moment in your head, wishing you'd had the courage to push back? The good news is you're not alone, and this is fixable. The first step is recognizing these patterns in your life. The next step? Learning how to break them. In the next chapter, we'll talk about exactly that. I'll share practical, proven strategies to help you stand your ground and say no in a way that feels empowering, not confrontational. Get ready to take back control. Now that we've identified the problem, it's time to talk solutions. Saying no might feel uncomfortable at first, but it's a skill you can master with practice. Let's break it down into a few key strategies that will help you set boundaries like a pro. First, let's address the fear of being rude. Here's the truth. Saying no isn't rude. In fact, when done respectfully, it's one of the most honest and considerate things you can do. Start by using clear, firm language. Instead of vague phrases like, "I'll think about it, try this, I can't commit to that right now." It's direct but polite, and it leaves no room for negotiation. Next, use empathy, but don't let it derail you. Acknowledge the other person's situation without taking responsibility for solving their problem. For example, "I understand that you're in a tough spot, but I can't help with this." You're showing understanding while reinforcing your boundary. Another powerful tool is the broken record technique. Some people will push back when you say no. They'll guilt trip you or try to convince you to change your mind. When this happens, calmly repeat your position without getting drawn into a debate. For instance, "I'm sorry, but I'm not available." If they persist, just repeat it again. Consistency sends a strong message. Now let's talk about guilt. This is where many of us struggle. We feel bad for saying no, as though we're letting someone down. But here's a reframe. Every time you say no to something that doesn't serve you, you're saying yes to something that does. You're protecting your time, energy, and mental health. And that's not selfish. It's essential. And don't forget about practice. Start small. The next time someone makes an unreasonable request, take a moment to pause. Instead of automatically agreeing, say, "Let me check my schedule and get back to you." This gives you time to consider the request without pressure and makes it easier to decline if needed. Finally, remember that it's okay to prioritize yourself. You don't owe anyone an explanation for your boundaries. A simple no is enough. As you put these strategies into practice, you'll notice something incredible. The more you say no with confidence, the less pushback you'll get. People will start to respect your time and energy because you've taught them how to treat you. In the last chapter, we'll bring it all together with a few final thoughts and practical tips to help you embrace the power of no. You've got this. We've covered a lot today, and by now, I hope you're starting to see the power in a simple word, no. It's not just a rejection, it's a statement of self-respect. It's a way of reclaiming your time, your energy, and your peace of mind. Let's recap. Saying no isn't about being rude or dismissive. It's about setting boundaries that protect your well-being. We've talked about the patterns of people who push too far, why it's so hard to say no, and how you can handle these situations with confidence and grace. Now, let me leave you with some practical tips to carry forward. Practice makes perfect. Start small by saying no in situations where the stakes are low. Over time, it'll feel more natural and less intimidating. Don't over-explain. You don't need a long list of excuses or justifications. A simple, clear response is enough. Remember your worth. Your time and energy are valuable. The more you respect your own boundaries, the more others will respect them too. Reflect on the benefits. Each time you say no to something that doesn't serve you, you're creating space for things that truly matter, your goals, your passions, and your well-being. Here's a challenge for you. This week, pick one request that feels unreasonable or overwhelming and say no to it. Could be something small, like declining to answer a call when you're busy, or something bigger, like turning down a favor that crosses your boundaries. Pay attention to how it feels. Not just the discomfort, but the relief and empowerment that come afterward. And remember, saying no is not the end of the world. It's the beginning of a life where you're in control. Thank you for sticking with me through this journey. You're not just learning how to say no. You're learning how to prioritize yourself and create a life you truly deserve. And that, my friend, is something worth celebrating. Until next time, take care of yourself and don't forget, you're worth every single boundary you set,